Hello, to the Child and Adult Care Food Programs at Risk After School Program 101 training. Hi, I'm Colby Chase, the nutrition consultant for the At Risk After School Program. If you have questions during this training, please reach out to me via the email address on the screen. Let's get started. First, I will be discussing the legislation that was passed in 2019 called LD 577. For those of you watching the recording, if this legislation does not apply to your district, or your district is an experienced CACFP sponsor, you may skip ahead in this presentation to a slide titled CACFP Meal Pattern. This year, many school districts have applied for the community eligibility provision, increasing their free reduced paid percentages to meet or exceed the 50% qualifier. Normally, this information isn't available until the 534 reports released in December or January. This year, however, our office is allowing districts to qualify schools using their own site-level data right away. If your school site or sites have 50% or more of students eligible for free or reduced price meals and offer an open to all after-school enrichment program, don't wait, apply today. The law is called an Act to Increase Access to Nutritious Foods in Schools by implementing an after-school food program for at-risk students. You can view the full public law online using the link shown on your screen. In short, the law requires that any school administrative unit with at least one public school where 50% or more of students qualified for free or reduced price lunch in the previous school year must take part in the federal child and adult care food program. How do I know if my school district meets the 50% or more criteria? In anticipation of this question, Department of Education Child Nutrition creates an annual report titled CACFP At-Risk Status Report by District. This report shows all the schools and districts that fall under the requirements of the law for that school year. The status report is located on the CACFP At-Risk webpage. It's important to note that the image of the report on your screen is an old example of the report and not current. Please check the full report to see if any of your district schools are listed. What is served for CACFP At-Risk After School? The typical meals are snack with 2 components or supper with 5 components. Meals can be in unitized containers or served through a normal lunch line. They can be hot or cold, which can make it an opportunity to use unserved items. Schools can offer versus serve, meaning you offer all 5 components and students need to take at least 3. And here's the best part. You receive $4.90 for every supper meal served. Reimbursement rates are updated every July, and the rates you see here are effective from July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2026. If you ever have questions about current rates, please feel free to reach out to me. Districts that operate CACFP at-risk can also serve meals on snow days, school vacations, weekends, and with prior approval, even serve breakfast or lunch on those days. It's also important to know that snack or supper can be served as soon as the school day ends. For example, if your school's dismissal bell rings at 2:30, you can start serving supper right at 2:30. One key program requirement is that participants must eat their meal on site. This is a question we hear from a lot of districts. If we meet the requirement for the CACFP At-Risk After School program, but we're already serving snacks through the After School Snack Service program, do we need to do anything? And the answer is yes. If your district qualifies for CACFP At-Risk, you're required to either participate in that program or formally opt out following the guidance in the law. Next, I'll walk you through what the process looks like and what steps you need to take. Let's talk more about what this really means. To qualify for CACFP at-risk, your program must include an educational or enrichment activity that is open to all students. So what does open to all actually mean? It means the activity can't limit who can participate, other than reasonable limits like space, safety, or licensing requirements. For example, sports teams like football or basketball don't meet this requirement because they're selective and not available to every student every day. Activities that do qualify include things like homework help, garden club, Lego club, arts and crafts, reading groups, really any activity that all students have the opportunity to join after school. If your district doesn't currently provide this type of activity, you'll need to either opt out using the guidance in the law or create an enrichment opportunity so you can participate in the CACFP at-risk program. How exactly does a district opt out of the CACFP at-risk after-school program if they choose not to participate? The law lays out a clear process. A school administrative unit can opt out, but it must follow these steps. First, the district's governing body, like the school board, needs to hold a public hearing. This ensures transparency and gives the community a chance to weigh in. After the hearing, the board must take a formal vote. If they determine that running the program would be financially or logistically impractical, they can choose not to operate it. This process is important. It's not just about saying no, but about documenting why participation isn't feasible for the district. After our district holds the public hearing and the board votes, do I need to report the results to the Department of Education? Yes. There's an online form called an At-Risk After-School Program Opt-out form that's created annually. This form requires information regarding the date of the notice, the date of the public hearing, and the date and results of the school board vote. This form also asks why you, the sponsor and district, decided not to operate the CACFP at-risk program. A common question that we hear is there a deadline or a timeline for this process? The qualifying district can start a program or opt out of the program at any time during the qualifying school year. So a district that may want to pilot the CACFP at-risk program and serve supper may want to start this in the spring to try it out for a few months before the school year ends. This is allowed and encouraged. Ultimately, every qualifying school district must either apply to run a program or opt out during the school year. If your district is interested in starting the CACFP at-risk after-school program, here's what the process looks like. Your first step is to reach out to our child nutrition team by email to let us know you'd like to get started. Step 2 is to watch the CACFP at-risk webinar, which you can find on the Maine DOE website. Step 3, send the required setup information to our team so we can add your district to CMP Web. Step 4, once that's done, you'll receive your user IDs and passwords from our team. Step 5 is to complete the CACFP online agreement in CMP Web. And finally, Step 6, once your agreement is approved, your district can start claiming meals from the beginning of that month. Please keep in mind that the approval timeline can vary depending on how many corrections are needed once the agreement is submitted, but please don't worry, our CACFP team works hard to process approvals as quickly as possible. If you have any questions about what you just heard or you need clarification, I recognize that each district and school and program is unique, so please reach out. I want to help. Now we're going to dig into the basics about CACFP at risk. All of the CACFP training documents are located on our webpage and can also be found using the link on your screen. All CACFP at-risk training materials are sent out annually when your agreement is approved or upon completion of the agreement renewal. First, we're going to talk about the CACFP meal pattern. At-risk programs can operate outside regular school hours, including holidays, vacations, and snow days. These sites can serve up to one meal and one snack per child per day. This is the CACFP meal pattern. In CACFP at risk, you can serve any child aged 18 years or younger. It's important to note that you would serve participants between the ages of 13 to 18 the same serving sizes as the 6 to 12 age group. These are minimum serving sizes. We certainly encourage your districts to serve more to the older kids, as they may need more. Breakfast may be served on school vacations, weekends, and holidays if the education enrichment activity is offered. The breakfast meal pattern is made up of 3 food components. The first is fluid milk. The second is a fruit or vegetable or a combination. At breakfast, fruits and veggies are treated as a single component. So for breakfast, districts can choose to serve a vegetable, a fruit, or a combination of both. And the third component is a grain food. If you wish at breakfast, you may replace the grain component with a meat or meat alternative item up to 3 times per week. Parents may provide one nutritionally equivalent component per day, and the district can still claim the meal for reimbursement. An important note to remember is there are no vegetable subgroup requirements in the CACFP meal pattern. Districts can choose if they follow the CACFP meal pattern or the NSLP meal pattern. The vegetable subgroups would be required for districts utilizing the NSLP meal pattern. The CACFP meal pattern includes a flexibility to serve meat or a meat alternative in a reimbursable breakfast. Schools may substitute the entire grains component with a meat alternate at breakfast a maximum of 3 times per week. And yogurt must contain no more than 12 grams of added sugar per 6 ounces. This information sheet is available on our webpage, and it can provide you with more tips and information about replacing the grain with a meat or meat alternate item at breakfast. The USDA has this great handout regarding serving milk in the CACFP program. There's a lot of great information on it, and there's a quick guide for serving milk to all ages in CACFP. On the back page, there is space to practice identifying the correct milk for different age groups. Very similar to NSLP, CACFP sites must provide reasonable modifications to meals and snacks or to the meal service itself to accommodate participants with disabilities. These modifications are done on a case-by-case basis. If the meal modification required does not meet the meal pattern requirements, then a medical statement from a licensed physician or licensed healthcare professional who is authorized to write medical prescriptions under state law must be provided. Meals that do not meet the CACFP meal pattern requirements are not eligible for reimbursement unless they are supported by a medical statement. The medical statement should include a description of the child's disability so that you understand how it restricts the child's diet. The statement should also describe what must be done to accommodate the disability. This may include what food should not be served and recommendations for what should be served. A medical statement is required to justify reimbursement for the modified meal. This statement must be kept on file at the site or where the food is prepared. If the parent provides a note signed by a doctor, then you must provide the substitution. You may always choose to accommodate a non-disability related special dietary need that is not supported by a medical statement if the modification requested can be made within the meal pattern requirements. An example of this would be if a parent told you that their child cannot eat strawberries. Strawberries can be easily replaced by another fruit to meet meal pattern requirements. Modified meals that meet the meal pattern requirements are reimbursable without a written medical statement. However, you should have a note from the parent on file so that we know why the child is receiving something different from everyone else and there is no appearance of any discrimination. If you already have a form completed for the school nutrition program, you can use the same form for CACFP. Non-dairy beverages can be served to participants with medical or other special dietary needs. Non-dairy products that do not meet eligibility requirements may only be claimed if there's a documented disability and the product is specifically listed on the diet modification form, which is signed by a medical authority. Non-dairy beverages must be nutritionally equivalent to cow's milk and meet the nutritional standards listed in the manual. Non-dairy beverages may be any fat level and must be unflavored for children under age 6. As you'll remember, fluid milk is its own component in the CACFP. So if you cannot serve fluid cow's milk, then you need to either find a beverage that's nutritionally equivalent to cow's milk, or you'll need a note from a doctor if you want to receive reimbursement. The following milk substitutes do not require a diet modification form: lactose-reduced milk, non-dairy beverages that are nutritionally equivalent to cow's milk. Remember, if the parent or guardian has a doctor's note, then you must provide the food substitute. However, you may run into a situation where a parent or guardian requests a substitute, but the child does not have a disability and they do not have a note from the doctor. It's definitely good customer service to provide the requested substitute if at all possible. If not, remember that parents can still bring in one food component, and you can still claim the meal if you provide all of the other food. Regardless of whether you're providing the substitute or the parents are, have the parent fill out the diet modification form and keep it on file to prevent any appearance of discrimination. The meal containing the substitute will be reimbursable if the substitute is nutritionally equivalent to the original component and meets meal pattern requirements. The diet modification form is on file. For example, a family might be vegetarian and want their child to receive a non-dairy beverage. It would be good customer service to purchase the non-dairy beverage if you can. Have the family fill out the diet modification form to request that their child receive a non-dairy beverage. Then refer to the list of milk substitutes mentioned in the last slide. If the non-dairy beverage that they are requesting is listed on the chart, it is nutritionally equivalent to cow's milk, so it meets meal pattern requirements and you can serve it and receive reimbursement with just the parent's note on file. If the parents insist on a non-dairy beverage that is not listed on the chart, then it is not nutritionally equivalent to cow's milk and you cannot receive reimbursement for meals and snacks containing this substitute until you get a note from a doctor. 100% fruit or vegetable juice is creditable in the CFP as either a fruit or vegetable, depending on what it's made of, but you are only allowed to serve juice one time per day. This is because juice lacks dietary fiber and other nutrients. Vegetables and fruits that are blended and served as a smoothie are considered to be juice and are included in the restriction of juice being served no more than once each day. The once per day juice restriction applies to the site, not to the individual child, so juice cannot be served at PM snack and supper, even if the snacks are being served to two distinctly different groups of children. If juice is being served at two different supper shifts to two distinctly different groups of children, it can be served to both shifts because only one meal service contains juice. The meal pattern for kids for lunch and supper is made up of all 5 food components. Unlike breakfast, fruits and vegetables are considered different food components at lunch. There are a few rules around serving fruits and veggies at mealtimes. Pureed fruits and vegetables used as part of a meal item, for example, pureed carrots in a sauce used for macaroni and cheese, can count as a creditable vegetable as long as the dish contains at least an 1/8 cup of a recognizable vegetable per serving. 2 servings of different beans or peas, legumes, can count as a vegetable and as a meat alternative in the same meal if they are in separate dishes. For example, chickpeas may be served as part of a salad as a vegetable component, and pinto beans may be served as part of a chili as a meat alternate component. A full serving of the legumes included in each dish must be served to each child in order to claim both a vegetable and a meat alternate component. At lunch and supper, you have the flexibility to replace the fruit component with a second vegetable if it's a different vegetable from the one you're already going to serve. This is because most children already eat enough fruit. Allowing 2 vegetables at lunch and supper increases exposure to a wider variety of vegetables. Here's an example. The lunch and supper meal pattern for children 6 to 18 years of age requires minimum serving sizes of a 1/2 cup serving of vegetables and a 1/4 cup serving of fruit. Therefore, the serving size of the second vegetable served in place of the fruit component at lunch or supper for this age group must be at least a 1/4 cup. And remember to offer 2 different vegetables. If you offer 1/2 cup cooked carrots and 1/2 cup raw baby carrots, then the meal would not meet the meal pattern and you would not be eligible to receive reimbursement for the meal. So in the example here, a supper with a serving of red peppers and a serving of carrots, both of which are in the red and orange vegetable subgroup, would be allowable. Schools may not serve 2 fruits at lunch or supper. In the CACFP, vegetables credit toward the meal pattern based on volume. It's the opposite of dried fruit. Raw leafy greens credit at half the volume, so 1 cup of raw spinach leaves would credit as half a cup of vegetables. And in the CACFP, we also credit tomatoes and avocados as vegetables, so please keep that in mind when you plan your menus. Food items that are a mix of vegetables and fruit, such as a carrot raisin salad, can credit towards both the vegetable and fruit component at lunch and supper if each component is easily recognizable and each serving contains at least the minimum reimbursable serving size of an 1/8 cup of carrots and an 1/8 cup of raisins. A child 6 to 12 years of age would need to receive a 1/2 cup of carrots and an 1/8 cup of raisins, dried fruit, in a serving to have the carrot raisin salad credit as the entire vegetable and the entire fruit component. Now you may have noticed that I said an 1/8 cup of raisins rather than the 1/4 cup of fruit mentioned in the meal patterns. That's because dried fruit credits a little differently. Dried fruits credit toward the meal pattern at twice the volume of fresh fruit. So a 1/4 cup of dried raisins credits as a 1/2 cup of fruit. Another rule around serving fruits is that home canned fruits are not allowed due to the risk of botulism, but freezing your own fruit is allowable. Just like vegetable and fruit mixtures, serving 2 vegetables as part of a vegetable mixture can also credit toward the entire fruit and vegetable component if you can recognize each vegetable and each serving contains at least that minimum 1/8 cup serving size. Home canned vegetables are not allowed due to the risk of botulism, but like fruits, freezing your own veggies is okay. At snack time, you can serve any 2 of the 5 components, as long as only one of the components is a beverage. It's best practice to include a fruit or vegetable as one of your snack components to encourage healthy eating. The grain component includes items such as breads, cereals, crackers, rolls, muffins, and tortillas. Under the CACFP guidelines, most sweetened grain products are not permitted, and at least 1 grain item served each day must be whole grain rich. Here are some common grain-based desserts: granola bars, cinnamon rolls, whole grain donuts, or any type of cereal or fruit bar. These items are not allowable in the CACFP and should not be served as part of the meal pattern. It's also important to know that CACFP reimbursement cannot be used to purchase grain-based desserts. The USDA has created this useful list that breaks down what is a grain-based dessert and what is not a grain-based dessert. This is a great visual reminder for your kitchen staff. On the CACFP Resources webpage, there is a section dedicated specifically to grains and ounce equivalent resources, including the measuring chart we just discussed, feeding infants using ounce equivalents guide, calculating ounce equivalents in recipes, and creating single serving packages of grains. A fantastic ounce equivalents webinar has been created and recorded to take you step by step through the process of determining ounce equivalents in the CACFP. The webinar link is available on the resources webpage, and I've also included the link on this slide. With the CACFP, 1 grain component served per day must be whole grain rich. If you plan to serve only 1 meal or snack per day in your program, the grain served at that meal must be whole grain rich. On this slide is a resource created by the National CACFP Sponsors Association that we have available on our webpage. This handout shows you how to correctly identify a whole grain rich food using the rule of 3 or a different method. In the CACFP, you are required to post a dated menu for parents and children to see the wonderful food you're serving. Production records are not required, so your menu must specifically state all the components that you are serving. Generic statements like fruit or veg should be updated to the actual item offered before the day of meal service. Cereals and yogurt should specifically list the type served since there are sugar limits on those items in the CACFP. The types of milk offered should be clearly represented on the menu. Here, you can see this district is offering 1% white or skim chocolate milk with each meal. Another menu requirement is that you identify which daily item is whole grain or whole grain rich. You cannot write a statement on the menu that says that 1 grain per day is whole grain rich. You need to identify specific items each day with the words whole grain or the letters WG or WGR. Speaking of menus, here's a photo of some meal ideas. These are examples of unitized meals from Portland Public Schools: chicken Caesar salad, make your own pizza, and a cracker stacker. Portland uses the CACFP meal pattern. Sanford Schools has utilized their mascot to brand their supper meals Spartan Super Snacks. They have created stickers that go on the unitized meal containers to show off their brand. Along with posting the menu in public view, the Spartan Super Snack menu is also announced daily on the announcements. This is a great way to promote your program during school hours. The at-risk meal service can look very different for every school in every district. Some use carts, some use a normal lunch line. Find a way that works best for your students and your staff. In Portland, meals are delivered to sites in Cambro containers that keep meals at correct temperatures. The meal service can be in the cafeteria or served from a cart. The kids can eat in the cafeteria, the classroom, on the sports field, the library, anywhere that is on site. Remember, participants can only take one component off-site, and that must be a grain, fruit, or veg. Please note that potato chips and veggie straws are not creditable items in the food program. In the CACFP, breakfast cereals served must contain no more than 6 grams of added sugars per dry ounce. These cereals include ready-to-eat cereals, instant cereal, and hot cereal. How do you determine if a breakfast cereal is within the sugar limit? You can use the Maine Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, otherwise known as WIC, approved breakfast cereal list. You can also use the USDA's Team Nutrition Training Worksheet, and you can use the nutrition facts label on the breakfast cereal packaging to calculate the sugar content per dry ounce. How do you determine if a yogurt is within the sugar limit? Yogurt served must contain no more than 12 grams of added sugars per 6 ounces. You can use the USDA's Team Nutrition Training Worksheet. You can also use the nutrition facts label on the yogurt packaging to calculate the sugar content. At-risk sites must offer all 5 components at supper, and the child may decline to take 1 or 2 of the components. Mixed component items containing 3 or more components may not be declined. A food component is one of the food groups that comprise a reimbursable meal. A food item is a specific food offered within a food component. Turkey on whole grain bread is a food item that contains 2 food components. Offer versus serve is not allowed for snacks. The USDA has this handout available for more information on how to implement offer versus serve. There may be times when you want to serve a homemade or pre-made combination food or mixed dish. These are foods in which a single serving of the food item contains 2 or more of the required food components. Common examples of combination foods are pizza, shepherd's pie, chef salad, and a hamburger on a bun with lettuce and tomatoes. To document how these foods credit toward the meal pattern, keep either a standardized recipe or documentation from the food manufacturer on file. We will ask to see these documents during the administrative reviews. A CN label clearly identifies the contribution of a product toward the meal pattern requirements. It protects child nutrition program operators from exaggerated claims about a product. A CN label provides a warranty against audit claims if the CN labeled product is used according to the manufacturer's directions. During an administrative review, the CACFP team will be asking to see copies of CN labels for items listed on the menus. There are a couple of helpful resources available for assisting you to determine if and how a food item credits toward the meal pattern. One of these items is the USDA's Food Buying Guide. The Food Buying Guide is available online and includes many different features to help you determine if items are creditable and help you determine how much food to buy. Another resource is the USDA's newly updated Crediting Handbook for the CACFP. This is a helpful resource for learning about the meal pattern and determining if foods are creditable or not. Now I'm going to talk about record keeping in the CACFP. Record keeping is a very significant part of CACFP. Keeping accurate, complete CACFP records proves that you're eligible to receive reimbursement. You'll hear us say a lot, if we can't see proof, we have to say it didn't happen. There are lots of different types of records that you need to keep. Today, we're going to go over what records you need to keep on file and where. Please try to keep your records well organized. It will save all of us time and energy when we review your program. You can keep your records digitally or on paper. We will be asking you to upload documents into the CMP Web e-review system prior to the date of the on-site visit, and we will also look at other documents while on-site. According to regulations, you must keep all CACFP records for 3 years plus the current year, so 4 years total. If your institution is going through an audit, certainly keep your records until the audit is closed. If your institution has a policy to keep them longer, of course that's fine as well. The current and past year's documentation must be kept on site. The other 2 years can be kept off site if you don't have enough space to keep all 4 years on site. We give you all of the different records, forms, and information you'll need for your daily CACFP operations. CACFP sends out at-risk documentation once your agreement is approved and renewed. Most of the resources are also at the very top of the resources page of our Maine Department of Education CACFP website, so that you can access them anytime that you need them. If the forms that we created for daily operations do not work well for your particular program, you're welcome to create your own as long as they capture all of the needed information. It will be helpful if you organize the majority of your program paperwork by month. When we audit your program, we will request to see all of your program paperwork for a specific month of operation, so having it already organized by month will be very helpful. We've been seeing more collaborations between community partners and school districts. This might include shared facilities, shared staff, shared programming, or other resource pooling arrangements. These collaborations can be great for expanding access and capacity, but it's important to remember that no matter how a program is structured or who partners with whom, all CACFP regulations still apply. Unaffiliated centers are sites that are not owned or operated by the sponsor or the school district. Even though these centers may have their own leadership, policies, or program structure, they are still required to follow every CACFP at-risk regulation. Because they aren't part of the sponsor's organization, they rely on the sponsor for guidance, training, oversight, and support. The sponsor or school must have an unaffiliated center agreement for each unaffiliated center, and this form can be found on the checklist tab in CMP Web. So whether a center is part of your organization or unaffiliated, or whether it's part of a community collaborative partnership, the expectations remain the same: full compliance, appropriate oversight, and strong communication between the district or sponsor and each center. Most school districts are already familiar with CMP Web. When participating in the CACFP at-risk program, you are required to complete an agreement in CMP Web. On the screen is an example of a CACFP agreement. To streamline the application process, school districts are not required to complete the budget or management plan sections of the agreement. The online agreement simply informs the state how and where your district plans to operate the at-risk program. We consider the agreement in CMP Web a living document because you can make changes to it throughout the year with state agency approval. It's a great reference to make sure you're claiming the correct number of sites and participants and the correct meals. Once you've completed one online agreement in CMP Web, most of the information will roll over into the following year. The district will be required to submit an agreement every year. Now we're going to go through some of the specific record-keeping requirements for different CACFP records. The first is the non-discrimination statement. The non-discrimination statement is required on all program materials that are distributed to the public that mention USDA or CACFP. The USDA is very particular about the non-discrimination statement. You must use the exact wording of the statement and be careful about font size. There are two non-discrimination statements, the full one and the short one. This is the full non-discrimination statement. As you can see, it's quite long and works well in bigger publications like program handbooks. This is the short statement. Prior approval for using the short statement is required for everything except for menus. There are different record-keeping requirements for different types of documentation. There are records that must be made available for public view, and we will check when we review your program. Please reach out to the CACFP for a poster if needed. In order to participate in the CACFP, you are required to train your CACFP staff on 7 specific CACFP topics annually. Trainings that you or your staff receive outside of your organization do not count toward this requirement. You need to train your staff on exactly how to perform the CACFP duties in your program, so outside trainings don't count. Some topics relate to all staff. Some topics only relate to staff with relevant duties. You are required to keep documentation of these trainings. We can't just take your word for it. Again, you'll hear us say, if we can't see it, we have to say that it didn't happen. We do have a form available to help you track staff training, and it's in the list of forms mentioned earlier. The form lists all of the required training topics, and it has places to record the date and location of the training, as well as places for trainers and attendees to sign in. Train on topics related to the staff members' CACFP duties. For example, there's no need to train someone on how to take a point of service meal count if they only file the claim. There is a form available to help you track staff training, which includes the required training topics. If you are working with an outside entity to provide the enrichment after school, and they are the individuals responsible for meal counts and attendance, they must be trained as well. It may be in the district's best interest to have site staff responsible for these duties sign a statement that they understand the training and requirements of the CACFP. There are 7 required training topics that you must train your staff on annually. When we review your program, we'll ask to see your training documentation for all 7 of the required topics for all applicable staff. Civil rights is the first required training topic. Everyone having anything to do with the CACFP needs civil rights training. We do have a civil rights presentation on our website that you can use for your in-house civil rights trainings, because civil rights procedures are the same for everyone. This is the only outside training that you can use for your in-house trainings. These are the other 6 required training topics. Please remember, I'm talking about in-house trainings, not trainings you receive from us at the state or elsewhere. For each of these 6 topics, you will annually train staff with related duties on how you meet these program requirements within your organization. You will train your staff on your organization's procedures for meeting these requirements. We can't help you with these trainings because we don't know exactly how you do things in your organization. For example, in some programs, point of service meal counts are taken by teachers. In other programs, the cook may be in charge. Every program's a little bit different, so you need to train your staff on your specific procedures. We touched on it briefly earlier, but it's really imperative that you keep any doctor's notes or parental requests on file regarding food substitutions. If the food substitution results in you not meeting the meal pattern, you must have a doctor's note on file if you plan to claim the meal or snack. If it's a parental request and you can still meet the meal pattern with the food to be substituted, keeping these notes prevents any appearance of discrimination if a child is not eating the same food as everyone else. We will ask about these notes when we review your program. You are also required to keep point-of-service meal count records. Point of service means that you're recording the counts of meals served immediately before, during, or immediately after the meal service. Most CACFP programs require meal counts to be taken per child at point of service. Some programs have a sheet of paper with a list of kids' names and columns for each meal and snack. They make a check mark next to each child's name when they're served each meal or snack. At-risk after-school programs may take consolidated meal counts, which are just a total count of meals served rather than doing it by children's names. We've included a sample meal count form in the list of forms on our website that was mentioned earlier. You're welcome to use this meal count form, or you can create your own as long as it captures all of the needed information. Some businesses purchase computer software that captures their meal counts. Either method is acceptable. Attendance records are another CACFP requirement. Attendance must capture the individual's first and last name. Just to be clear, this is attendance at the meal, not attendance at the enrichment program. Meal counts should never be higher than attendance, so attendance records make a great edit check to ensure that you are not overclaiming meals and/or snacks. Build in an edit check when compiling meal counts and attendance for the claim. USDA likes to see 2 sets of eyes on all program paperwork to ensure accuracy whenever possible. Some districts are using their point-of-sale keypad system as attendance, as it links to a child's name and a tick sheet, similar to the ones in the summer for the meal count. All districts currently operating the program do it differently. Do what works for your school. Accountability is key. Districts cannot claim more meals than participants in attendance. This is something that needs to be discussed when partnering with outside organizations. The district, organization, or agency that signs the CACFP agreement will be responsible for any errors. In the CACFP, this entity is called the sponsor. This meal count form is available on our website. It gives space for a participant's first and last names, a check mark for attendance, and a check mark for the meal. Again, all at-risk sites meet these requirements differently. Do what works best for your sites. Here's a screenshot of a monitoring and 5-day reconciliation form. This is required for institutions with more than one site to ensure program integrity. This form is available on our website and is also sent out annually to at-risk sites upon the approval of agreements and renewal agreements. When monitoring multiple sites, the sponsor is required to review each site 3 times per year. 2 of the 3 visits must be unannounced. At least 1 announced visit must include a meal service observation, and new sites must be monitored within the first 4 weeks of operation. We do provide monitoring forms for you, which outline everything you need to observe and record. Also, when monitoring multiple sites, the amount of time between visits cannot exceed 6 months. The timing of unannounced visits must vary so they're not predictable. You must make sure to vary meal services observed, and if serving suppers, evening snacks, or weekend meals, be sure to observe those as well. A 5-day reconciliation form must be completed at each monitoring visit. The purpose of the 5-day reconciliation is to reconcile meal counts to attendance. It must be performed at every monitoring visit. It determines if meal counts are reasonable. It can highlight discrepancies in meal counts and attendance, and it ensures that licensed capacity is being followed. Here's a screenshot of the 5-day reconciliation form. This process allows us to look at a week's worth of attendance and meal counts to make sure things look okay. This document is also available on our webpage. The USDA has issued the attached question and answer memo to answer questions regarding the annual collection of race and ethnicity data. Although CACFP institutions are no longer allowed to make a visual observation of race and ethnicity, the data must still be collected once each year. Districts that collect meal benefit applications should make every effort to help parents understand the reason for the data collection and encourage them to complete the race and ethnicity portions of the form. The attached memo provides some links to school data and census data websites, which institutions that do not collect race and ethnicity data through the meal benefit applications can use to collect the data for the area in which their sites are located. These districts should utilize the links to collect this data every year unless you are already collecting the data at each site. USDA expects institutions that collect the data for other purposes and programs to gather the data from those programs and keep it in their CACFP files. The memo specifies that the USDA encourages institutions that do not collect enrollment forms to ask parents to verbally identify the race and ethnicity of their children, and that the USDA discourages asking children to self-identify. Please read the memo carefully. The USDA expects a specific conversation to take place if the institution asks parents to identify the race and ethnicity of their children. If parents rarely come into the site, or if the conversation is uncomfortable, please use the data that can be found through the provided links for school and/or census data. If an institution uses the data found on the school data or census data websites, please be sure to print or otherwise document that data and keep it in your CACFP files. Schools that sponsor at-risk sites can use the race and ethnicity data that is collected for the school in which the at-risk program is operating. When filing a claim, it's important to remember that each claim applies to a single calendar month. For example, February 1st through February 28th, even if that month ends in the middle of a week. Make sure your other supporting documents reflect that as well. At-risk after-school programs receive the free rate of reimbursement for all meals and snacks served. CIL stands for cash in lieu. This is extra reimbursement money that you will receive for every lunch and supper served that meets the meal pattern. So for every free lunch and supper you serve, you'll get $4.90 in reimbursement. This is a screenshot of a site claim for a for-profit childcare center in our online claiming system. We've received a lot of feedback from folks telling us that they like this claiming system. Here's the information that you'll be entering each month for each of your sites. First, at-risk programs enter the number of children that participated in the month in the free section, as they get the free rate of reimbursement for all participants. Second, you'll enter the number of days you operated. That's the number of days that you were open for enrichment and fed kids at least one meal or snack through the CACFP. Third, you'll enter your total monthly attendance, which I'll explain in the next slide. And fourth, you'll enter your total meal counts for the month. There are a couple more steps involved in submitting your claim for payment, but we have directions for filing claims in the system and are here for assistance when you need it. As I mentioned, you will be required to report your total monthly attendance in our online claim filing system. This is how you calculate your total monthly attendance. At the end of each day, you'll count the number of unique children that attended your site using the attendance roster. At the end of the month, you'll add up all of the daily totals to calculate your total monthly attendance. The payment system has edit checks in place to ensure that we're paying you based upon what you're approved for in your agreement. If you try to claim more than what's in your approved agreement, the system will give you an error message, and the system will not pay a claim that has errors. When you claim, you cannot claim for more children than you've reported as being enrolled in your program. Since you are an open site, this is the best guess you made regarding the maximum number of children you could serve at one time. If your program has the potential to serve more children than your best guess, say there's an event happening at the school during the same time as your CACFP at-risk supper time, make sure you increase that amount for the month you plan to serve those additional kids. Also, you cannot claim for any meals or snacks that you're not approved to serve, and you can't claim for any months that you said you would be closed. That's why it's so important to make sure that the information in your agreement is always current and correct. If you go in to update your agreement, the system also looks at your sanitation and fire inspection dates and will not allow us to approve the agreement if those dates have expired. We have been working around that process, but due to delays, please make sure your agreement is updated with any changes. Also, when making any change to your agreement, such as an increase in the number of children enrolled, we will need to approve that change before you'll be able to file a claim for that change in the system. We can reimburse the district for changes in the month that you report the change and going forward, but we cannot reimburse the district for changes in the past. For example, let's say you revise your agreement on February 8th to increase your enrollment from 100 children to 110, and we at the state approve that increase on February 9th. We can process your February claim for up to 110 kids, but we couldn't process your January claim or any month prior with 110 kids, only the 100 children, because that's all you were approved to serve in January and before that. Claims must be entered into the system and must be in pending approval status on or before 60 days after the last day of the claim month. For example, November's claim must be submitted on or before January 29. The system does display the claim due dates for you, so you'll always know when claims are due. Exceptions. Institutions are only allowed one exception to this rule once every 3 years. Submissions of claims past the 60-day deadline are only allowed with prior approval from the state agency and require that you write a corrective action plan, which you will implement to prevent future late claims. Can the CACFP at-risk after-school program continue to operate in summer after schools close for summer vacation? No. Experienced sponsors are already aware that under federal regulations, the CACFP at-risk and the Summer Food Service Program cannot operate at the same time. Whenever your school year ends, so must the CACFP. Schools are encouraged to transition into SFSP during the summer, and the CACFP at-risk can pick back up again when school starts in the fall. Now, please go to the website on your screen to complete the CACFP At-Risk 101 quiz. This tracks your participation for this annual training. No certificates will be sent out to those watching the recording. Please document your time and attendance after viewing this webinar and keep the documentation in your CACFP files. As a reminder, attending this training does not meet the requirement for in-house training. You are required to train your district staff on the 7 required training topics. This concludes the CACFP at-risk training. Please reach out to me if you have any questions or comments, and have a super day.